So here I am with Dave and Carina and Gary. We're talking about a sand pit in Pembroke and some land that Carina and Dave are purchasing. And I just showed a couple of pictures, and I'll just go back and show them again just for the recording. This is the DUNROBIN pit that Gary and I were involved with a long time ago, where the after use was obviously a spring-fed lake and some beautiful buildings around it. And one of the questions I asked Gary just before we started this recording is what are the prospects of something similar as an after use with this sandpit in Pembroke?
Yeah, okay. So first of all, Bruce, you're into a pretty heavy-duty market area where DUNROBIN site is, rural Ottawa, which demands pretty crazy competitive land use requirements in that particular area. In your case, we had done a below water study of aggregate material, and again in Ottawa there's definitely a huge absence of sand. Like the sand is basically gone in Ottawa. They're going to Renfrew, going to Lanark, going to Leeds Grenville to get the sand for the market area. So quite a bit of a different market. Even back in those days, Bruce, I think, was a little bit put back when I said we need to extract that sand before we can think about another after use. And I think M&R had a pretty strong mandate in those days to protect the resource. I don't think that mandate is as strong now as it used to be. I think they got their hands full with the aggregates program, and their focus is really on license applications and amendments more than it is regulatory requirements or getting involved with municipalities' official plan and zoning bylaw policies. So I wouldn't expect as much pushback at all, Bruce, on whatever kind of development you might be bringing forward, in terms of not taking the sand from below water table on this site.
So hang on a second, Gary. What I think Carina and Dave would like to do, though, is they would like to remove the sand from below the water table, if that's possible. Do you know from looking at the pit and the pit license and the material that you got, where the water table is on this property?
I don't think it's much below what some of the current floor area is presently. Like there's a 1 meter buffer required by the site plan, and you've got 15 meters, 15 to 18 meters of material on that site. So I think in some parts of it, you're probably close to water table. I'm not as familiar with the landscape up there, but the bedrock does pop out in certain areas, so that could be a bit of a constraint. You may be hitting bedrock before you hit water table there. I'm not really sure on the site specifics until I went up and had a look at the site. There's 2 or 3 options in terms of trying to develop a lake in a residential subdivision these days. And I'm not so sure, or if you were looking for my advice, I wouldn't be pushing for option 1 being a site plan amendment to go below water as the option to get at that type of land use. My preferred option presently would be to exhaust the pit of all the sufficient material above water table, and then come back with a plan of subdivision and a grading plan and a stormwater management plan that would allow you to extract material below water and create a lake as part of the subdivision development. I think you'd have a lot better luck with that. The whole reason for that slide presentation that Bruce was showing you there was in support of a license expansion to go below water table up in the McDonald's Corners area. And I'm having a huge pushback on that application. And it's really as a result of another application by another aggregate producer that's really creating the havoc up there. But I think anywhere you go in Lanark or Renfrew, they're not really used to dragging material from below water, and it's freaking a lot of people out. So, there's no issue with it, and there's no substantial impacts, and you can do your hydro G studies, and you can do all your technical information studies to pursue an amendment. but I think the road is a lot less rocky if you do it under the Planning Act as opposed to the Ag Resources Act. That's quite a flip from the old days, I would say.
I think just hang on a second there, Dave. I think, and Karina, I think that is very, very good advice. Really, that's very, very helpful. And I'm just going to show Gary you a picture that I took on site a few weeks ago now, that I took on site. This is. I guess that's the pit face there. I guess that's probably at least 15 meters, I
Yeah,
think. It's
Yep.
quite high. And what I think I heard you say a short while ago is that maybe, this is Daniel, maybe a meter below where Daniel is standing, there could be the water table there.
That could be, yep. I mean, I can't say for sure, but based on the contour elevations that I'm seeing on the site plan that allows you to go down to 1 meter above water table, it looks like some of the old existing contours when the pit site plans were upgraded under the Aggregates Act, I think you had pretty well reached some of that level. Now, you have to go to the satellite image and photos like you have up here to really get a better understanding of where you are in phase 2 of the site plan. That doesn't show up on existing or operating plans, but I think that's a pretty good image, and I think they've likely gone close to water table, I would think there. I don't see any dampness in the sand per se, but I would think they've probably gone as deep as they likely are allowed to go.
Do you know, Gary, from looking at the material, at the written material that we have, what the remaining capacity of this pit is?
Based on some of the satellite image, I think they're quite significantly along into phase 2 of the operation. Like I don't think there's a long life left here. I think comparing the satellite image to whenever that other site plan was done, it's progressed pretty significantly. Like it's got a 200,000 ton tonnage limit on it. So if it's been operating commercially, which it looks like, there's, that's a pretty active looking face. There's no grass growing in or anything. So I think it's been active. And even the barn swallows up at the top there, they wouldn't be nesting there if it wasn't an active pit. So, I think it's probably substantially depleted. Like I mean, substantially's not, it's hard to put a time around it, but I would be guessing 5 years or something like that, maybe left. Like, again, I'd have to go up and look at the site, but I'm just basing my view on the satellite image that I'm looking at.
And if it has 5 years left, would it have 50,000 tons remaining? Would it have 100,000 tons remaining?
2, 4, 6, 8. Yeah, well, with the 200,000 ton capacity, I mean, I don't know if they're working close to their limit at this point in time, and you might not be able to find that out, and neither can I, because they won't give personal tonnage per site. You can get a tonnage per municipality, but not per site. So you can't really go back and see what they've extracted in the last number of years. But like I say, it looks like it's a fairly viable commercial operation. So, they're probably taking 80 to 100,000 tons out of there. So I don't know. I would say you got 500 to 1,000,000 tons maybe there.
So
And I'm not
I heard
saying
you
all
say,
of that doesn't have to come out either. I mean, if
no,
there's,
but I heard you say that the limit was 200,000 tons.
yeah,
But you're saying that there might be 500,000 to 1,000,000 tons of sand here.
yes, right.
Wow.
So that's, again, that's why I'm coming up with roughly a 5-year exhaustion of material. But I mean, I could be way out. Like you'd have to see the site plan. You have to go out to the site and just draw some lines on that site plan, and then look at the contour lines to come up with an estimate.
That's very helpful. And what, back in the day when KARSON was working the DUNROBIN pit, Gary, we got $1.05 a ton as the owner of the pit. Every time KARSON took out 100 tons, we got $105 for that. We did nothing. We just provided the land. KARSON applied for the license or maintained the license, did the extraction, brought the loader in, the trucks in, and we got $1.05. Today, what should Dave and Carina get for a sand FOB this site?
I would think the market's probably doubled what it was when you were involved with it, Bruce. I'd say you should be getting a couple of bucks a ton for this type of material. Just again, because sand's so sparse in the Ottawa area, and it looks like there's some decent veins of it in this site, although a good chunk of this looks more like granular fill than it does granular A. So again, it's based on the type of material you're looking at. But that would be the minimum amount. Like from that picture there, that one that you're just showing, the one before that, like there looks like there's better quality material certainly on that site than the photo that has Dave in it for sure.
Question, Gary.
So I think it's fairly valuable.
Just a question. So what happens if, we think, you might think there, the pit license for 200,000, but you're thinking there might be 500,000 to $1 million there. So what happens then? The pit ceases to operate, but there's still material. So what's the next step?
Well, you might try to surrender it, although again, like I say, M&R's mandate isn't really as much towards protection of the resource these days, so they're not going to stop you from going from leaving the site and not going below water. But I think if you left substantial reserves above water, I think they would have some concern about that. So worst case scenario, I would say, is if you tried to surrender it prematurely and there was 1 million tons left on the site, then M&R would have some concern that they could bring forward during the Planning Act application for a subdivision to say, no, there's still material left on this site and we want to see that extracted before.
So Dave, my gut feeling is that this material is probably worth about $3 a ton. Gary said the minimum is probably $2, but it could be a little bit higher. So my sense of it, just from talking to a lot of people in this industry, is probably worth $3 a ton. If you have 500,000 to 1 million tons left, and if this sandpit operation doesn't affect the rest of the property, right? As long as you can go ahead. I mean, it's going to take you a number of years to develop the property. Maybe it takes 5 years or longer, maybe 10 years to develop 185 acres. If you could leave this 24-acre site in operation and you're getting $3.05 a ton, and you've got 1 million tons, last time I checked, that's over $3 million.
Yeah.
And by the way, Gary and I, our commission on that is 20% each, right, Gary?
Wow. Good chunk.
So we're kidding, of course, Dave and Carina.
So I'm sorry, Bruce. Gary, could you just expand a bit on that M&R? Getting them not, they wouldn't be happy if we had that much there. So at that point, they would force us to extract the rest, or would it just be, did we get a credit, or how would that work? I'm just not sure. I'm not quantifying that.
Well, they would probably, well, again, I can't speak for M&R these days.
Right.
I don't think they're in the game that much anymore. But back when I was in the game, like if Bruce had to come forward with that, we would say, yeah, we would accept the surrender of your license, but somebody else is going to have to license it somewhere down the road. You got to get that material out of there, because we can't just throw that resource away, because God only put it in certain places, and it's a commodity that everybody's after. Like sands like gold to the Ottawa market, especially these days.
So Dave, what I'm hearing from Gary is really, really helpful. I mean, my knowledge is a bit out of date, but Gary is not. And what Gary is saying is that you might have, and here's what I'm thinking. Let me just go back a step. Here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that, Dave, once you and Carina close on the property, it would be worthwhile to do another site visit with Gary, so that he can, better quantify. Do we have 500,000 tons left? Do we have 1 million tons left? And if you can leave the the pit in operation for another 5 years or maybe even longer. And you can take out, you and Carina can take out, $3.05 a ton, like I said, on 1 million tons, that's over $3 million. Totally net to you. You don't do anything, right? You just get money for nothing, right? By providing the agreement, the lease agreement. And then what Gary says is we'll be silent about going below the water table as far as MNR is concerned, Ministry of Natural Resources. We won't mention anything to them. But in the Planning Act, what we'll do is we'll create one or more lakes on the property, right? Which will generate a great deal of fill, which you can use on site. Do you understand, Dave?
I understand. Yeah, 100%.
Because it's very valuable on site. Now, you can't take it off site without a pit license. And if we give up, after exhausting the pit, 500,000 or 1 million tons, we can't now export it again, but we can use it on the site. We can use it to raise a grade where we need to backfill houses. I mean, it's very, very, very valuable, and it's great material. So we'll be able to create one or more lakes through the Planning Act and not through, the license with the Ministry of Natural Resources. But it does mean potentially maybe $1.5 million to $3 million of additional revenues for you and Carina.
Okay, but how do we get to extract that additional amount? Because the pit license is only for 200,000 tons. So you'd have to apply for another pit license to extract the remaining amount, or how does that work?
You could just leave things the way they are and extract your maximum amount per year until it's exhausted, or you could apply to have an increase in that tonnage condition. Now,
so I think again, the tonnage in a year is 200,000, Dave.
Right.
That's
in
why,
a year.
Yes, a year, and that's why Gary was saying if there is 1 million tons, which I would not be surprised. I mean, I just walked around and I have a sense,
Yeah, you were saying
it wouldn't surprise me if there was 1 million tons. It means at 200 tons per year. That implies, a 5-year life. And let me just underline what Gary said. Sand is equivalent to gold these days.
I like gold.
Yeah, I do too.
Yep, absolutely.
So I think that's very, very, very helpful. One other question I had for you, Gary. Carina and Dave have been under some pressure to sign a lease with the existing Sandpit operator. I've forgotten his name, Dave.
You know what? I honestly forgot as well. I like Carina's been dealing with that. So don't feel bad.
But anyway, the existing Sandpit operator has had a handshake agreement with the existing landowner, and I think he has been taking advantage of the existing landowner because there's no way this guy is getting anywhere near the value that I think he should be. So he put a lot of pressure on Dave and Carina to sign a new lease agreement, which they don't have to do. It's just a month-to-month agreement right now, so they can terminate him at any time. And who are the other operators if Dave and Carina decide to terminate this individual when they take over? Who are the other operators in the area that you think they should talk to about a new land lease agreement?
Tomlinson's got a bunch of applications. He's got an application up in Storyland Road that's rolling along right now. Tomlinson's probably the biggest player in the Ottawa market that's starting to go beyond the city limit. I'd say Aecon's probably up there as well. Lafarge possibly. Though I'm not sure what Lafarge's market really is these days. It may be just supplying their own internal concrete and asphalt plants. But Tomlinson and Aecon for sure. There's a bunch of other small operators that I deal with in Ottawa that are looking for sites. You might be a little bit beyond the radius for some of that use for Ottawa market for my smaller guys, but I'm sure if we floated it around, we can certainly find somebody that's going to give you a pretty reasonable price for it. But yeah, I agree with Bruce. I wouldn't be carrying on with a handshake agreement. I would get something in writing and have it kind of move with the cost of living, so that like the license fees on the gravel pit go up every year based on a cost of living increase or your whatever your index is for the time. So your extraction agreement needs to do the same thing. As the value goes up, you need to be making some more money at it. Most of these agreements that I see with big companies like Lafarge or Aecon, they'll have a breakdown of, you know, different types of materials that they're going after. And again, as Bruce has also said, they pretty well take advantage of you. They're going to tell you most of the material they're taking out's like granular fill or granular B type material, when it most likely could be asphalt, concrete sand, or septic system sand, and it's all high quality. And you should be, you know, that should be broken down. So, you know,
Okay.
when they break those commodities out, you're getting the best buck for whatever the material is that they're taking.
So
I
you
just
would,
want to go back and just one thing that you mentioned, Bruce. I think even under a planning act application, under official plan or zoning, you could probably still take material off-site. I don't think you'd necessarily be held to that. I don't know if you've traveled on Highway 7 lately, but Kavanaugh put up a huge big
yeah,
bedrock stockpile along Highway 7 there for the expansion of the west end of Carlton Place.
yeah.
And that was all crushed up, used for the subdivision. And there's a big surplus there, and that'll go off site. That's going to go into the local market.
So
But
do you not need a roadside permit for that?
no, you don't, Bruce. I mean, I can get around it for sure.
Well, you can see
Um,
how valuable Dave and Karina, Gary would be. I think Gary
Yeah.
can not only help you navigate this, he can probably help you get a square deal with a new
Yeah.
operator, if that's
I have another question, Gary, for if you don't mind. Bruce, when Bruce, you know, we went up to visit the site, he had said that the adjacent, there's you know, when you see this pit on the on the east side of it, there's like open land there, and Bruce had surmised that he thinks that that might be fill as well. It might be sand in there, but up to about 1 million, you know, 1 million or so tons. Do you think that if there's any other sand around that pit? Is that maybe that pit area was not zoned properly, or it could be expanded?
it could be. I haven't looked into it that deep. I haven't put enough time into it to look at the aggregate assessment mapping for there. But I mean, my son was based on the army base up in Petawawa, and it's
As
just
was I.
sand everywhere.
Yeah,
So, you know, you could be in the same situation there as
yeah,
well.
so
So
Gary, what
yep,
I saw, this is the 24 acres or so
yeah,
that is the sand pit, the
yep,
licensed area. The triangle that you see here, if you can see my cursor moving around, is the
yep.
185 acres. And I think what Dave is asking is a very good question. Like if you're doing up here, if you're doing some residential singles up here, Dave,
yeah.
or townhouses, there's also a possibility, if the conditions are right, to extract some more sand and create some more lakes. Do you guys know Gary? I'm sure you know what it's called. It's called Sunset Lakes in Greeley. Do you know that area?
Absolutely. Yep.
Dave, do you know Sunset Lakes in Greeley?
I've driven by it, but I didn't know there was actual lakes in there.
Well, I'll show you that in a moment. But when you go on site, Dave and Karina, after you close on this with Gary and he walks around, he'll give you an estimate, probably a pretty good estimate of what the remaining tonnage is here, but also whether in fact there's likely going to be you know, the ability to create a few more ponds or lakes in this area, maybe even over here. I don't know.
Yep.
Perfect.
I would think as you come down the hill towards the Ottawa River, you're going to probably get, you know, it's going to
Yeah,
peter out, or you're going to get into a different type of material. But
okay,
again, I think because you're so close to an urban environment,
okay,
I think M&R would be pretty flexible in terms of, you know, what kind of hoops they're going to make you jump through. I just think they'll be lenient as long as you can get most of the material out of here. You really have to concern yourself again with what the after use of the site's going to be. Like, there's no
yeah,
sense of taking everything to water table and, you know, having a big, uh, you know, wet area just above land that you can't do anything with. So,
I
you
agree with
know,
that.
you
So
know, if you've got a couple of 100,000 tons at the end of the day, like I know just again and looking at the site plan,
uh-huh,
there's a phase 3 and a phase 4 as well. I wouldn't even worry about even ever extracting anything out of those two phases. I think as long as you get most of the material out of phase 2, you'll be in a situation where you could
yeah.
surrender up the license whenever you want.
So Dave and Gary, you should be able to see on the screen. Can you see on the right-hand side of my
Yeah.
screen, Dave?
Yeah.
This is, I think they're at like phase 20 or something like that of Sunset Lakes. It's been going forever. And what they do is they dig out lakes. And these are not the same kind of lakes as Dunrobin Lake or what you will end up with, I think, in Pembroke. The Pembroke site, because it's sand and you have these underground springs, the water that you'll get in your lakes is just absolute, will in all likelihood be absolutely beautiful. This is clay. Greeley is clay. And so what they do here is they dig these shallow lakes, and then they arrange their drainage so that these quote unquote lakes fill up. And I don't think I would swim in them. You know, in Florida, these kind of lakes look nice, but they're full of alligators. Here, they would be full of, you know, the stuff that comes in through stormwater, with all due respect, is dog shit, you know, petrol and other chemicals from your streets, waste, all kinds of things. So they look nice, but they're not the same as what you'll be able to do. So here is you know, a picture of Sunset Lakes, and it looks very pretty. But when you go there in July and it's nice and warm, you won't find anybody, I don't think, in the lakes. And look what they have next to the lake.
Of course.
Okay. Now, does that tell you something about the lake?
For sure.
Yeah, they have a chlorinated pool next to a lake. Here's another picture you can see here. So the lakes are pretty to look at, and they do use it for water skiing. They do. So they're, you know, now again, if it was my subdivision, I wouldn't have any motorboats in there, because, you know, really the last thing I want on a beautiful summer day is you know, boats roaring up and down next in my backyard, basically. You know, it's like having a snowmobile trail. I love snowmobiles, but having a snowmobile in your backyard going up and down all winter long is not fun.
Yeah.
All right. So I think what you and Carina will end up with will be significantly better than what we see in Greeley at Sunset Lakes.
Oh, I agree 100% there. It's all in the way you develop it, and that's the stuff. I mean, you've got time to develop it properly. And again, just looking at what Bruce just showed you and comparing that to Dunrobin Lakes, completely different environment altogether.
Yeah.
I agree. Those lots, Emerald Lakes, a couple of other, there's the two big lakes in Greeley that Spratt's had as a pit way back in surrendered probably in the 80s. And this Sunset might be one of them, but I think that's a different one. But Spratt operated those sites for probably 50 years, and then they sold those lots for $80,000 a piece in 1980. And it was like they made 10 times the money they ever did out of the sand pit. But I can tell you, I've seen people moving out of those subdivisions and moving into other gravel pits that have been extracted below water, primarily because they're sterile, because there's so many septic systems dumping into them. Everybody's cutting their grass right to the water's edge. They're putting fertilizer in there. It's full of phosphorus. It's dead. So they just move out of there, because you can't get people to coordinate a kind of a green environment when they're already there. You got to do it before they come, and you got to market it to the people that will utilize it that way.
And Dave, you remember that when you and Carina were at Dunrobin Lake with me, I spent a bit of time going over the environmental covenants that are registered on the field. No fertilizers, no insecticides, no fungicides. You know, even though these are very large lots, much bigger than Sunset Lakes lots are like a half an acre. Our lots at Dunrobin Lake are 2 acres to 5 acres, right? They're much bigger. So we were very, very, very careful about the environment, and we test the water at Dunrobin Lake twice a year, and it's still really in great shape. And the way you can tell that even without testing it, as I mentioned to you when we were on site, Dave, is that if you have landing turtles in your lake, you know the water is great. Because the moment you have, like Gary's saying, all the, excuse my language again, the shit running into your lake, your blending turtles will go away. Then your fish will die, and you'll end up with nothing. So the environmental covenants will be extremely important, at least as important, in my opinion, as your architectural covenants.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
All right, I
Okay.
have a couple more questions, Gary, and again, thank you for your help today. In a new agreement with the site operator, there are a number of ways to protect Carina and Dave. One would be to install a weigh scale and weigh every truck that goes in and out. Another is to conduct an annual survey to see how much material has been removed. Another way might be to look at satellite imagery. Of those three methodologies, which one would you use to enforce the agreement?
Well, again, it depends on your operator and how trustworthy they are. Some are better than others. Some you have to have scales there, and you have to have somebody to watch in every truck that goes out the gate, because they'll go around the scales and not pay for it if they can. I mean, surveying them, if you got the right people doing the surveying, is like most highway contracts, like big highway contracts, like the twinning of the Highway 17, for instance.
Mhm.
The material that would be supplying those from an MTO source, they would probably weigh it, or they would do volume truck measurements and submit it that way. But then MTO would usually come in at the end of the day and do cross sections, just to verify that, you know, it's relatively the same thing. So I would say a combination of the two is probably good. Spend the money on the weigh scales, and then every once in a while or periodically get somebody in to survey it. There's lots of people that have expertise these days. I know one good one in Lanark with GPS units, and they survey stockpile volumes and measurements of holes that are in gravel pits for volume calculations. And I think there's a lot of expertise out there. I haven't got involved in the GPS stuff, but there's lots of guys, like I say, you know, these bigger companies, they want to keep track of their inventory. They want to know how much they're crushing, how much is selling, how, you know, how to balance the spreadsheet at the end of the day.
So
Um,
Dave, what I think Gary's saying, and he's spot on again, is the only thing that has gotten cheaper in the last 30 years are these volume surveys or cross sections. And the reason that for that is they're now being done by drone.
yeah,
So you can fly your drone over the pit,
Yeah.
you know, in the early spring, and you can fly your drone over the pit at the end of the season, and you'll know pretty much almost, well, exactly, you know, you'll know reasonably exactly how much material's gone out. And, you know, there are people, as Gary was mentioning, there are people out there who really understand how to do these volumetric measurements using drones, and it's very automated now. They just fly over, and they download the information, the computer spits out, okay, you've got 210,000 tons have disappeared this season.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so that is good news. I think that's the way you probably end up doing it. And one other thing, if I forget, Dave and Carina, you remind me and Gary that when we do a new agreement, the cost of that drone survey is paid by the licensee, or so the land lessee, not by you, but the people who are hired by you, not by them.
Okay.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
So the guys flying the drones are working for you, but they're paying you to pay them, if you see what I'm doing.
I understand.
The money comes to you, not to the drone operator, so that they understand where their money is coming from. It's coming from you and Carina.
Yeah. I have a question, Gary, if you don't mind.
Yep.
I'm wondering if we were going to do a land lease portion for the pit owner, how would we formulate that lease? Is there a specific format you would do? Is it a monthly? Is it an annual? How do they typically work?
Usually agreements are relatively long term. I mean, they're 5-year agreements, I would say, probably minimum to get
Okay.
them signed on. But you still have the option of deciding, like on the purchase of the property, you're going to need a license amendment to either
Okay.
put the license in your name or your company's name,
Okay.
or the name of the leasee. And again, Bruce might be better advise you on what the better route is. There's liabilities on both sides.
Right.
But again, as long as there's a closed-end time frame, like 5 years, and then it comes up for renewal again, you can go back to the trough and go with another operator, and they're
I
always
really
aware
like
of that.
And something else I didn't think of until Gary mentioned it, Dave, and that is a COLA clause, a cost of living agreement, right?
Yeah.
It's COLA, cost of living agreement or whatever. And that's, I never put that in with Carson. I mean, I got paid, it took us 17 years to extract all the sand, and I don't think I ever got a raise. I should have. And the other thing that we might do with a new agreement is we might ask for an amount upfront, Dave.
Yes, for sure.
You know, like, I mean, if they're gonna, you know, extract, say, 200,000 tons a year for 5 years, and they're paying you, say, $3.05 a ton, that's 600 grand. We'd ask for a $200,000 advance on signing.
Okay, fair enough. I know most commercial contracts do stipulate that you would put a deposit down. So
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
I've seen
it's more than a deposit. When it's 200 grand,
Yeah.
it's $20,000, it's a deposit, $200,000, it's an advance.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. But
Yeah,
I
and you
think
can put
that's-
a variation in there too about, you know,
Okay.
sometimes they'll sit on reserves if the lease is long enough and they'll use it from somewhere else, so they're getting it cheaper from. But
Okay.
you might want to consider, in conjunction with what you just suggested, is putting a minimum amount a year on there. So a minimum
Oh,
a minimum
100%.
charge of 100,000 tons. So if no material goes out, you're still getting paid. So at least your taxes and everything's getting
Oh,
paid.
I love that.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean.
Man, these are nuggets, man.
These are nuggets. And
All
Dave,
right, my fees are going up.
Hey, not
you
yet,
gotta
not
raise
yet.
that hourly rate, but not for Karina, Dave. So those are called, Dave, so you know, Karina, those are called take or pay contracts. So if they don't, if they don't take any sand, they still have to pay. So it's a, you know, if they're I think Gary's spot on. If the maximum amount is 200,000 tons a year, and hopefully they'll take 200,000 tons a year for 5 years. The minimum would probably be 100,000 tons a year for 5 years. So you're going to make, at $3.05, you're going to make $300,000 a year for 5 years minimum. If they take more, then that's fine. You'll make more money.
So what I'm getting from this discussion right now is that right now we are on a month to month with this gravel company that's extracting. So theoretically, we could go in right now and get a 5-year minimum contract to be able to extract material to get us to the limit that we want to get to, because there's no contract in hand right now. It's a handshake. So there's nothing. So we could do this right now and start getting money almost immediately.
That is correct. What I asked you not to do, listen, I'm just here as your coach and your friend, Dave. I'm not the boss. You and Karina are. But I've asked you not to sign anything with this guy. You know, he cannot continue after you close on the land. He cannot continue. He has no occupancy rights. You know, we should make that clear that he is at an end. That doesn't mean that he doesn't get the contract. It just means that he doesn't have a contract. His month-to-month contract is at an end. Now, maybe you have to close on your lawyer will have to answer this, but maybe you have to close on the site and then give him 30 days notice. I don't know. Maybe that's fair. But after 30 days, he's out. Maybe you can do it on the same day as you close. Look, you're terminated. But that's a legal question. I can't answer that. My preference would be you close on whatever it is, September 30th, October 1st, you notify him his land lease is at an end. End of story. He must not take any more sand. But I would say to him at the same time, we're willing to have discussions with you, but your land lease is at an end. Please do not remove any additional material. Because if he's paying this guy $20,000 or $30,000 a year of what should be maybe as much as $600,000 a year, he is not going to renegotiate in good faith. He's going to say, well, instead of paying $30,000 as I did to the previous landowner, I'll pay you $35,000. Well, fuck you very much. Excuse my language. But no, we're not doing it. Okay, that's not fair. That's not fair.
Okay.
You know, this site is costing you and Karina a lot of money in the millions of dollars, and you have to be treated properly by him or anybody else. And what Gary has said is that Aecon, possibly Lafarge, certainly Tomlinson and others, you know, I've worked with Tomlinson for many, many years, and he's very fair, at least in my experience, they're very fair, and they'll treat you properly, in my opinion.
Well, we'll bring you along for the negotiations, that's for sure.
Well, but we
pit
definitely
license-
need Gary on our side.
Yeah. Question: the pit license right now is held by the company right now that's extracting, correct?
I'm not sure. You
Yeah,
have to tell
I'm
me
not
who
sure
the
either.
operators, the license is in, the license is in the name RPR Kramer Development Limited.
Okay,
So
that's the
I
guy
was under the
property. He's the owner of the property.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I was
Well-
just about to say, thank you very much for that, Gary. Dave, I was just about to say to you and Carina that when you close, the amendment that Gary was talking about is in the name of your company. You have to hold the license, not the operator.
Okay.
You know, because if you have the license in your name, you have all the power. If it's in the name of this operator, that's a different story, okay?
Okay, no problem.
So it doesn't go to your, even if you do a deal with Tomlinson, I have a lot of respect for Tomlinson, it's still in your name, and they're a land lessee. They're not, you know, they have rights to extract the material. It's an extraction agreement, as Gary said, but you are the pit owner and the pit licensee. So you'll need to get your lawyer on side with that, and you'll need to ask your lawyer, we would like to terminate the month-to-month arrangement on closing if possible.
Okay.
Yep. Now, I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that at all. I take things from the same perspective as Bruce. I like to be in control by having the license in my name. But that makes the extraction agreement that much more complicated, right? Because
Yeah, that's why
as
we
the
have lawyers.
licensee, you now have a whole bunch of liabilities that you don't have if it's in Tomlinson's name, for instance. So
Okay.
if the agreement expires 5 years down the road and Tomlinson decides not to renew, then you're stuck with all the rehabilitation requirements, which could be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to rehabilitate, right? Where if it's in Tomlinson's name, he's responsible
Yeah,
upon the surrender.
but that's why
But-
we have lawyers, Dave. The agreement will very clearly make the extraction agreement, the land lessee will be responsible for all of those costs, right? For example, the costs that I mentioned about having a drone fly over your site twice a year and give you the volume calculations, that's money that comes to you to pay them. Similarly, any kind of rehabilitation requirements, because there is an amount that Tomlinson or whoever else is the extraction agreements with, they have to pay the Ministry of Natural Resources a certain amount every ton, which is supposed to go to rehabilitation.
Okay.
Understand? So the
Gotcha.
ministry actually has that money. So we have to make sure that if Tomlinson doesn't fulfill their obligations, that money doesn't go to Tomlinson, it goes to you to fulfill the obligations.
Yeah. No, that's not the case anymore, Bruce.
Oh, what the hell
There's
do I know?
There's no rehabilitation. There's no rehabilitation security deposit that comes out of the license fees anymore.
Well, then, okay, it's good to know.
Rehabilitation, yeah, rehabilitation is strictly a liability on the licensee.
Right, so that's even better, Gary, because what we'll do then, Dave and Carina, is we'll put in the extraction agreement that the money for every ton that's taken out, say they're giving you $3.05 a ton. Our consultant here will tell us how much we should be charging. In addition to that, it goes into a trust account for rehabilitation, and they pay it to you.
Nice.
Do you understand? Instead of going to the ministry, I'm good with that, right? It's like self-insurance. Okay.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you'll in the that's even better, Gary. In the extraction agreement, it'll be $3.05 a ton, and then Gary will give us some guidance, and maybe there's an extra 40 cents a ton that goes into a sinking fund, basically. And at the end of 5 years or 10 years, whatever it is, there's a few $100,000, possibly $1 million in the account, which is used for rehabilitation.
Love it.
Yeah. And I mean, that sets you up for further negotiation. I mean, one of those companies might come back and say, well, yeah, we want to be able to retrieve that money out of there after we do the rehab. So you have to come up with some formula to calculate.
That's why,
what's
generally
fair, right?
speaking, it goes into a trust account. You can set that up with your lawyer. you know, all lawyers, I think, in Ontario have a trust account. I'm
Yeah,
sure about that. And certainly a real estate lawyer have a trust account. And he just, or she just opens up a trust account. The money goes in there. If Tomlinson does all the work that they're required to do, that money with a little bit of interest goes to them. If they don't, it goes to you and you spend it.
okay.
I have one last question for you,
Yep.
Gary.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine, although I didn't really see it, but I would imagine that there is a topsoil operation going on here as well.
Yeah, that's a good one. I don't know what the horizon type material around Pembroke is like. I mean, I know that there's a lot of sand there, so there probably isn't a big horizon. The pit license as it stands right now requires you to retain all topsoil on site to do rehabilitation with.
Oh,
Now, that's another good indicator of whether you're dealing with a decent operator right now. If you're not seeing any topsoil piled up around the site to do the rehab with, then he's not a good operator, and you
I
probably
never
don't
saw
want to
any.
deal with.
Did you see any, Bruce? I didn't see topsoil anywhere. Could it be
Yeah,
grown
that's
over?
what I was worried about, that because the other thing that you know, exactly what Gary said, if you go to most sand pits, they'll windrow the topsoil, and whether it's 10 years or 20 years or whatever it takes, when you know they'll rehabilitate the site, they have all the topsoil they need to do that on site. And I didn't see that, and that gave me some concern.
Well,
Yep. Yep. It's
that's
like I
good to
say,
know.
I would think it's kind of critical up there. Unlike the Ottawa market again, you're dealing with sand almost right to surface with a very, very fine veneer of topsoil. And so it's critical that you keep it all on site because you're going to be buying it to do those front yards of the houses that you're putting in, right? So you want to
Wow.
keep as much of that there as you can.
So in your extraction agreement, Dave, the new one, that you want to make sure that no topsoil is removed from the site. Because you're going to need that, as exactly as Gary said. All right, Gary.
Now, in
Sorry,
in
go
a
ahead.
perfect world, M&R would be in there regularly doing inspections, and if they
Yeah.
saw that, they would be shutting the operation down and doing something about it and getting rehab done as a result of that. We're not in a perfect world. M&R has, like I say, on the regulatory side of the operations are not really in the game these days. They're basically dealing with things on a complaint basis, so you're not going to see guys prowling around trying to see if guys are in compliance with their license or not. I mean, that's part of the business that I do these days as well, is do compliance reports for folks, trying to keep all that stuff in line, giving them advice on whether their operational phasing on their site plan really matches their business plan, whether there's any major complaints that's going to shut an operation down too sweet.
That's a great point, Gary. So another, I mean, this is very valuable. So another thing, Dave, that we should put in that extraction agreement is they should pay you to hire Gary to do an annual compliance report.
Oh, compliance report. Okay.
Yeah, you know, because I mean, what the hell? I mean, you want to make sure, not just for yourself, but for future, for the benefit of the entire town.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that
Perfect.
we're not left with a mess.
Karina's
That's
asking.
right. There's kind of two things that I do on that line, and I've done it for Tomlinson's and Crookshanks and Aecon and a number of the bigger companies, is I do a kind of a strategic compliance analysis over a 2 or 3 year period, just to get them all in line and train some of their staff to do compliance reports at the end of the 3 year term. But then there's other clients, and again, the main reason for that, I'm not specifically trying to work myself out of a job by dealing with it that way, but I don't plan to do this till I'm 80 years old, hopefully. But people, like I say, these site plans, and I approved a lot of site plans in Pembroke District. I helped the inspector up there for quite a bit, approving site plans.
Okay.
M&R, for the most part, wrote most of those site plans. They weren't developed like you would have a new licensed operator do it today. They were just a regulatory piece of paper that M&R put their blessing on. So they don't always actually work. Like the phasing of operation that might be on that plan might be totally against what you're trying to achieve. You might, you know, there might be a like Bruce showed in the pictures, you might have a granular fill kind of type material in one part of the pit, and you might have some really good concrete sand in another part. And if they're in two separate phases, you can't operate them simultaneously, and you need to be able to do that. So you have to have your site plan set up to do that. So that's what I try to do, is highlight, first of all, the things that are going to shut you down right away and send 20 workers home until things get cleaned up, get you in line with your phasing of operation, and then, you know, thirdly, just to deal with a lot of little minor amendments or buy some time to get some fencing in place or some just the minor stuff that needs to be done. But I do have clients that I do compliance reports annually for, just to be a different set of eyes.
Okay, I have a couple questions from Carina, and I think we've already answered them. But number one is, right, if we get, like, I know we talked about either getting licensed ourselves or getting the getting someone like a Tomlinson to get the license. So just to be clear, if we get the pit license, that means we have to have insurance for it, correct?
I would say so. The
Okay,
liability, like I say, is on you. Like if somebody backs out of the agreement tomorrow, you're saddled with bringing all the rehabilitation to play. Again, in the old days, there would be a sequence of progressive rehabilitation that would happen across the site as each parts of each phase get done. That's not happening because nobody's pushing them these days. So now you got big moonscapes of stuff going on where there isn't a lot of rehab. Now there is a lot of rehab. I see a lot of rehab when I'm wandering around, but there's a lot of poorer operators that aren't doing that. So you don't want to be left with that mess at the end of the day.
So hang on a second.
It's a lot cheaper, like
Hang on
in
a second,
Bruce's.
Gary, hang on.
Yep.
So Dave and Carina, you know what a triple net lease is, right?
yeah, we've talked about that.
We've talked about that. So the extraction agreement is very similar to that. So any costs that you have, including insurance, which you will need, are
Yeah.
paid for by the operator.
Okay,
It's like a triple net lease. So if if I had an office building and I was leasing a space to you, you would pay your base rent,
yeah, and your
sometimes
hydro.
called minimum rent, and you would pay your share of utilities. You would pay your share of property tax. You would pay your share of operating expenses. And those operating expenses include things like administration, bookkeeping, accounting, insurance. Of course, things like snow removal, repairs and maintenance. I mean, if you look at a triple net lease, it's 65 pages. And the reason it's 65 pages long, Dave, is that, you know, the operator, in this case, the tenant, is paying those costs of the landlord. It's supposed to be worry-free in the hands of the landlord. And this is very similar to that. I had that with Carson Cartage, right? So I probably could have done better than the $1.05 a ton. And I certainly didn't have a cost of living agreement, but I did have a triple net lease. So I didn't worry about insurance or bookkeeping or accounting or rehabilitation. All of that was in the agreement. All right. So Karina's right to raise those questions, but I can put your mind at rest as long as, you know, we've recorded this conversation. So, you know, and it will be unlisted, Gary. So the only people who will have the link to it will be Carina and Dave, myself, and you. But if it would be very helpful if your lawyer, as he or she is writing up this agreement, were to watch this video and understand what it is that we're trying to achieve.
Okay, perfect. I got one other question, and she just wanted to know about the topsoil that has been removed. Now, if you know, the current pit operator didn't do anything for the rehabilitation, like basically you can't do anything about it, right? So what do you do in that case? Like, do they pay for not rehabilitation? I don't know how does that work?
No, you still have to do the rehab. You're going to have to import manufactured topsoil or get material from somewhere else. Mushroom compost mixed with sand, mixed with overburden, whatever you can get your hands on.
And so Dave and Carina, that was a great question, Carina. Basically, I think this operator has ripped off the landowner. If he has removed the topsoil can be very valuable. Carina, you may not know this, but do you know what a cubic yard 1 cubic yard of topsoil delivered to your house is worth these days? Don't answer because your voice is gone. But Dave, do you know the answer?
I'm pretty sure because you get I know it's like something like for 1 cubic yard, it's about $300 and something.
It's about $300.
Yeah.
Think about that. We're talking about $3.05 a ton for your sand. $3.05 a ton. And a ton is roughly a cubic yard. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what's better, $3 a ton, or a cubic yard, or $300 a cubic yard?
Oh.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
So if this guy had 20,000 tons of topsoil and he bagged it up and sold it, you know, that at $300 a ton, that's $6 million. He has ripped this guy off.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. Now that's assuming that, now if it's a truckload, if he's exporting the topsoil, you know, in 20 cubic yard trucks, he's not getting $300 a yard. He's not. He's probably getting $20 a yard. But still, you know, if the topsoil is gone, it shouldn't be. And I'll bet you there's maybe 50,000 tons of topsoil that has disappeared. Now, you have a claim against this guy, but enforcing that would be virtually impossible, I think.
Oh, for sure. Okay, perfect.
You know, it would be impossible. I mean, you would end up in court for the next 7 years, and a judge would eventually just throw up his hands or her hands and say, "I can't figure this out. Go away."
Okay, no problem.
All right, but we want to be a little smarter going forward. That's why, if we can, we will. You will ask your lawyer if you can terminate him on the day you close.
Okay.
So, Carina, those were good questions. I hope we've answered it. Gary, send a bill for $1 million to Carina and Dave. Carbon copy me on it for your time. Thank you. And after closing, we will be back to you. Okay.
Yes, sir. Sounds
And
good,
Thank you
guys.
very much, Gary.
Good luck with your venture.
And just before you leave, Dave, do you have? Sorry, yeah, Dave, do you have Gary's cell number?
No, I do not.
Gary, can you put it in the chat box? If you can't find out where it is, you can just blurt it.
Yeah, I can see it here.
Okay. And Dave, can you put your cell number in the chat box too, please?
Sure, 100%.
So I want you guys to be able to, you know, I want Gary on your speed dial. Because this is big money for you and Carina. It's pretty much what I expected to hear, but it's maybe even a little bit better than I expected.
I'm not sure if I'm in there or not.
You should see a little blinking light. That's where the chat box is.
Yeah, I clicked on it. I'll try it again. Chat.
Well, can you see Dave's number in there?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah, so just see the little blue dot there. Just type where that underneath the blue meeting chat. It says meeting group chat. Underneath there, it's a blue rectangular box. Just type underneath there.
Just say it out loud.
Yeah, just say it out loud, Gary.
Okay, that's a good idea. 613 893
Okay.
6227.
6227. Great. Thank you, Gary.
Rocks. Yep.
I'll just repeat that back. 613-893-6227.
That's it.
All right, Gary, I mean, it's been a real pleasure to see you again, and thanks for everything. Dave?
No problem. Have you heard
soon.
any good news back from Wib Crane lately? Do you know if that license got issued yet or not?
I'm waiting. I do check in with them every few months, and it's moving down the road about as fast as a snail.
I know. The city just came out of the woodwork at the end of the day and wanted an entrance permit, and it's just like, my God, you had 2.5 years to pursue that. Why are you coming up with that now?
They don't know which end is up. All right.
Oh, it
Gary,
never even came up at the zoning meeting, but anyways, good. Thanks again,
Thank
guys.
you so much, guys. Really appreciate this, your time and your effort. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye, guys.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Get better, Carina.
I will. Thank you, Bruce.